All right, let's talk about the work of biologist Michael Levin. His ideas are so out there, they might just completely flip how you see everything. And I mean everything, from a single cell all the way up to your own mind. Let's dive right in.
It all starts with a really practical question, one that comes straight out of regenerative medicine. How in the world do you get a complex biological system, like your own cells, to do something you want it to do?
And this is where Michael Levin's work gets so interesting. He argues that to answer that question, we can't just think about chemistry. We need a whole new kind of engineering, one that treats biology not like a dumb machine, but as a cognitive system, something with its own goals, something we can actually communicate with.
So if you want to persuade cells, or really anything at all, you're going to need a new toolkit. And Levin has a framework for this. He calls it the spectrum of persuadability.
This is a super practical, hands-on way of looking at things. We're not talking about some fuzzy, philosophical definition of intelligence here. Nope. In this framework, intelligence is defined by the kind of tool you need to use to influence a system. It's all about what actually works. And when you think about it, this spectrum is actually super intuitive, right? If you want to change a clock, you grab a wrench, you physically move the gears around. For a thermostat, it's way easier. You just give it a new goal, the temperature you want. To get a dog to change its ways, you use training. And to persuade a person, well, hopefully you just use reason and logic. The tool you have to use tells you everything about the intelligence you're dealing with.
And here's the key takeaway. The smarter a system is, the less you have to micromanage it. Like right now as I'm talking to you, I don't need a wrench for your brain. I'm not trying to control your individual synapses. I'm just giving you a high-level prompt, my words, and I'm trusting your incredibly complex cognitive system to handle all the chemistry needed to make sense of it. This leads to a really profound point from Levin. He says that the tools we use literally limit the world we can see. If you go out into the universe armed only with rulers and voltmeters, what he calls low-agency tools, then you're only ever going to see mechanisms. To see a mind, he argues, you have to use a mind. It's like you need the right kind of antenna to pick up the signal.
Okay, so if intelligence is a spectrum, a sliding scale, how do we actually measure it? How do we figure out where any given system falls on that scale?
Well, this is where Levin brings in this really cool idea he calls the cognitive light cone. Now, this is nothing to do with how far you can see. It's not about a telescope. It's all about the scale of the goal a system can work towards, both across space and out into the future.
And you can see just how wild this scaling gets. A tiny bacterium, its goals are minuscule, finding some sugar a few microns away in the next couple of minutes. A dog's world is bigger. Its goals might span across the yard and last for a day. But us, humans, our goals can be massive, operating on a global scale and stretching out for decades, sometimes even beyond our own lifetimes.
Now, you might be thinking this is all just philosophy, right? Just a neat idea. But no, Levin is very clear. This is a testable, empirical science. We can actually run experiments to find out what a system's goals are.
And he lays out this dead simple three-step method. First, you make a guess about what its goal is. Second, you get in its way. You put up a barrier, you make things harder. And third, you just watch. The cleverness it shows in finding a new way to get to that same goal, that's your measurement of its intelligence. This simple trick turns the search for minds into a real experimental science.
Okay, so once you have this toolkit, once you start applying it and looking for minds everywhere, well, something really interesting happens. You realize our old, comfortable categories, they just kind of fall apart.
As humans, we just love putting things in neat little boxes, don't we? This is alive, that's not. This is a mind, that's a machine. This is a baby, that's an adult. But Levin argues that in nature, there are no sharp lines. It's all a continuum, a spectrum. And these hard categories we invent can actually get in the way of real progress. Because when we label something, oh, that's just a machine, or that's just a collection of cells, we stop ourselves from what he calls hoarding tools. We don't even try to use a technique from, say, behavioral science on a system we've already written off as simple. And we could be missing out on huge discoveries because of it.
I mean, just think about the word adult. Sure, it's a useful idea for legal purposes, but did anything magical actually happen on the morning of your 18th birthday? Of course not. It wasn't a switch that flipped. It's a slow, gradual scaling up of your cognitive abilities. Our labels are convenient, but they hide the really fascinating, continuous process that's actually going on. So, if there are no sharp lines, and if intelligence is just this scalable property of matter, then what does that really mean for the relationship between our minds and our brains?
And this is where things get really, really wild. This question pushes us into Levin's most mind-bending idea, and it's perfectly captured by one of the most incredible transformations in all of nature.
Let's talk about a butterfly. Inside that chrysalis, the caterpillar's brain is literally dissolved. It's turned into a liquid goo. The hardware is destroyed. And yet, get this, experiments have shown that a butterfly can remember things it was taught as a caterpillar. So if the hardware is completely rebuilt from scratch, how on earth does the software survive?
This kind of evidence points to a conclusion that is just staggering. It suggests that if the brain isn't the thing that's producing or storing the mind, then what is it actually doing?
So if the mind isn't in the brain, where is it? Well, this is Levin's most radical answer. He proposes that there's a vast, non-physical space of patterns out there, kind of like the abstract space where mathematical truths like pi exist. And he thinks that this space also contains minds.
In this model, your brain isn't the supercomputer running the show. No, it's more like a thin client, an incredibly sophisticated biological antenna. It doesn't create the mind, it just tunes into a specific mind pattern that already exists out there in that platonic space, and it allows that mind to connect to or ingress into our physical world.
And that leaves us with this incredible final thought. If this is true, it suggests that we could be surrounded by countless other kinds of minds. In our cells, in forests, maybe in places we can't even imagine. They're just broadcasting on frequencies we haven't built the right antennas to tune into yet. What happens when we finally do?